All right, you're good to go, Natasha.
All right. Welcome everyone to, to this month's controversy at noon. We're very happy to have you here. We have a lot of ground to cover, and so I've asked the panelists if we could just jump straight into the panel without doing the usual introductions, and they've all been super gracious and said yes, that's fine with them. You can find their bios on the WGA website and their individual sites as well. But as the panel goes along, I think what you're going to find is that Nafisa, Nyang, and Paul are not only experts at their craft and experts at not just writing, but writing for children. They are also bringing that same level of expertise and care, thoughtfulness, and passion to this discussion. And I think you're going to be very interested in what they have to say. This is Controversy at Noon, meaning you will hear different viewpoints and thoughts that you may strongly disagree with. The panel's intention is not to change anybody's mind, but to provide a space for thoughtful contemplation and to prompt discussion and conversation. We absolutely welcome all of your questions and thoughts, so please put them in the chat box. Ashley Mann will be monitoring that, and we will leave time at the end of the session to be able to address all of your questions. And then as a last gentle reminder to please mute your mics and videos. So on that note, let's jump into this and see what we have. Now, I'm going to start with, let's start with you on this.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, you're on the spot. So, to our audience, I just encourage you to just sort of take a look at these stats that I am showing you. We've got 1 million kids in Canada who are below grade level with their reading. This pandemic disruption is forecast to cause a 30% increase in socioeconomic skills. A gap. We've got 27% of kids who are starting grade one without the early developmental skills they need. And we have almost 14% of grade 10 students who do not have the baseline level of reading skills. And this sort of like, there's more and more stats that we see. Now, Young, I'm going to say this to you that, a lot of times when writers are looking for projects, one of the things that we sort of often hear is that, oh, I'm going to do a kid's book because, it's a lower word count and it's simple vocabulary and the sentence structure is smaller. And, therefore it's going to be easier to write for children than it is for adults. And this belief is usually followed by a period of shock and awe when that writer realizes there's no such thing as a kid reader, and that the developmental and literacy needs of children um, are like wild and varied, and one of the things that I often say is that the reason that adult writers have adult readers is because the children's writers were there to inspire a love of reading and to meet that child reader where they were at the literacy level and the social level that they were at as well. So can I ask you, Nung, as writers, whose works are for children, what are like one or two misconceptions that you see surround this idea of children's literature or writing for kids?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think a couple of common misconceptions that I think of when it comes to children's literature is basically, as you say, the first and foremost, I think, is that a lot of people assume that writing for children is easy because, especially because I do write a lot of children's picture books, and because of the few words and the shortness of the picture book, they assume that it's easy to write. But children's picture book and middle grade or young adult books can be very difficult, especially the children's picture book because it's book that has, so many pages and so many words, and so you have to convey a story through these few words, and you want to build character, and you want to have a story, a plot line, and at the same time convey a certain message or convey certain emotions through a picture book. And so it's very difficult. And of course, it's also very difficult to please the publishers when it comes to writing these short children's books. At the same time, one of the biggest misconceptions is that children's literature is simple, simple stories. But actually, because children are so brilliant and complex individuals, that they are able to consume a variety of subject matters. And I feel that children's literature can delve into very complex issues that pertains to society and what affects us in the world today. I've seen storybooks that are written about the Holocaust, Indigenous issues, gender issues, of war, and I write about refugees and immigrants, of dementia, and racism and such. And so children literature can delve into very complex issues, and children are capable of reading these issues and learning from it. And I think I think the two big misconceptions that I think involve children's literature. But one side note is that I think there's a misconception from some individuals where children's literature is like, a way of indoctrinating our children. And that's a misconception too. And so that's just, yeah, just a thought. But yeah,
No,
these
that's wonderful.
misconceptions,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. That's great. And Nafisa, I saw you nodding your head. What did you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I completely agree that it is very difficult, especially picture books, because I attempted one and then I gave up because
Yep.
because you, you have to make an entire world fit into like 32 pages, and
Hmm.
that takes expertise and skill, and it's not easy as just scribbling away that many people who only write adult or who only read adult fiction seem to think. And what one common misconception that I actually personally encountered was that people seem to think that children's literature, people who have not read children's literature, seem to think that the plots can be very like linear or nothing else happens. You know how in complex, especially fantasy, since that's what I write, there's no subplots or anything. It's just from A to B, and clearly they haven't read any children's literature, because that was maybe in the past that was common, but now you have 5 or 6 subplots happening because kids, they like complexity, and they're fully able to handle complex narratives. In fact,
Hmm.
I think um, the problem is not the readers, but actually the gatekeepers who
Mm.
persist in thinking that children need to maintain some sort of archaic innocence. I mean, I won't say archaic, but they don't understand the fact that the world we live in and our reality is so much different. I think this is a question. This is an answer for a question that you asked, that you are going to ask, but I'm
Yeah.
just going to bring it up now that
Jump in. Yeah.
that the innocence that the children's literature from the past has, that's a question of the past. Now times have changed and
Yeah.
the needs have changed, and as writers we have to change with it. So yeah, children's literature is not, especially children's literature, I say it's harder to write than adult literature.
Yes, and I agree with you that with the idea that the nostalgia and the way we sanitize previous generations, like as if some of our parents or grandparents weren't in the 80s doing the Madonna outfits with their bras, showing under lace or over top, or I always remember, and I can't remember what the singer is, but was either Chubby Checker or Fats Domino singing I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill. And you know what he's talking about, right? But that was like the, I don't know, 50s, and people eating goldfish. And now saying, oh, well, look at these kids with their Tide Pods. But yeah, but previous generations were eating goldfish and stuffing each other into, telephone booth. So, are we really that different? And was it really that much more innocent? Paul, can you take us home on this? Any last things
Or
you want
should
to
I
add
just
in?
get like really
Do you want to do a
controversial
hot
now?
take?
Well, no, I don't know if it's a hot take, but I do think there persists sometimes a belief that as professionals, what we do is less serious and less important.
Mm,
And that there is an infantilizing of children's authors and illustrators because
mhm.
we work in the children's realm. And as you said, Natasha, in reality, what we're doing is we are creating your adult readers for the adult market.
Yeah,
We're giving them the skills, we're giving them the love of reading.
yeah.
There's also some other things like none of us are literary experts here on this panel. Nafisa and Young, correct me if I don't know something, but I don't sit down and go, I'm going to teach children literacy today. It's not my first concern. It's not how I approach a book. I approach
It
story
isn't?
first. No, it's like, yeah, kids, come take your castor oil now. This will be good for you. Don't you want this?
It's true. That after
Sit
school
down, you
special.
little morons, and let's take your pablum.
Yeah, yeah, it's yes, 100%, 100%. Really, really well said. Really well said. All right, so we're gonna move on. Um, so we had a few months back where the Alberta government had come and had revised these rules, and they said, okay, the works are not allowed to contain any explicit images. You can write about it, but you can't like show it. And there's always this sort of like controversy about sexuality. And that's always what we sort of come back down to with when people talk about the indoctrination of children and protecting the children. It's never like, okay, guard the children against like this late stage capitalism, and protect our children from the indoctrination of billionaires being able to decide wages. It always comes back to like, but the sex. And you have people who are like, well, I know what pornography is, I know what sexuality is, and I know what's sexually, inappropriate. But when we think about like images, and I just want to sort of pause on this screen for our audience, to just say these are three classical works that I think you can argue are probably provocative art, but is it obscene? Is it should it be banned or censored? Which in the case of all of these images, they were. The swing was considered overtly sexual. Lita and the Swan was also considered vulgar. And De Goya's The Nude Maja, while he was alive, it was pulled by I think it was by the Spanish because they considered it morally corrupting. And then he was interrogated on it. And basically, then it just was hidden until his death. There was never any sort of like public viewing of his work because they were upset at the depiction of what looks to me like a genetically, anatomically correct female. But there was issues with that. So when we think about this idea of banning and censorship for children, um, is one of the things that we are sort of fighting against or having to grapple with is this idea of subjectivity, and I don't know if it was Sandra Day O'Connor, the Supreme Court Justice, who had said, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. Is this like one of those things? Like, how do we define it and where do we go from here? As writers, how do we navigate this? So, Paul, we ended with you on the last one. Can I start with you, please, on this?
Sure. Nafisa, you spoke about gatekeepers. I'd love if you were, when it's your turn, you got even more specific about who we're talking about, because I just hate this idea of like someone off in the ether. Because the other part is when we talk about gatekeepers, there are a lot of gate openers.
Mm,
There are people who are champions for our books, the stuff that we write. Um, and I think that that's important to talk about too, is that there are people who are willing to go the mat,
mhm.
even if they don't seem they are. I once had a librarian come up to me and say, what's the problems in your books? Because I need to be able to defend it. And I thought, well, not the way I'd
Wow.
word it, but I understand what you're saying. Um, and I think we need to start looking at anytime someone says sexual content, is that not just code? All the
Mhm.
images you showed were depictions of female sexuality, which are tied to women's rights.
Hmm.
So are we not just talking about women's rights here? Like, why do we need to start coding what we're saying? Let's take it right back. And censorship sucks. That's a full
Hmm.
sentence. We can put the period and we don't have to say more.
Yeah.
And most people would agree with that. So
Yes.
as
100%.
writers,
Thanks, Paul.
I think we need to not get off into the weeds and be distracted by code words like sexual content. Because, okay, show me the writer who's writing Bunny Boinks Bunny for the preschool set. They aren't there. The publishers aren't publishing it. The teachers, librarians, parents aren't buying it. It doesn't exist. So what are we actually attacking here?
Yeah. And thanks, Paul. And before I interrupt you, is there anything else you sort of want to like finish off on? Because you made a really good point with the
Did
teachers.
I?
What? Yes, you made some excellent points. Um, yeah, and you did because you're talking about like this idea that parents have to come in and like Nafisa said, the gatekeepers, they have to come in and supervise the teachers, and it's kind of this wild idea that somehow the teachers, we can trust them with our children, but not really. And it's either like you either trust them to educate your children or you don't. And I always think about like this idea that they're indoctrinating or teaching our children like bad things. And I feel like if that was true, you wouldn't, by the time the child is 6, wouldn't have issues where you have to say to a child, no, no, use a Kleenex, not your hands. No, don't touch that after, or tie your shoelaces. You know what I mean? Like if indoctrination worked, we would never have anything other than like super, very quiet, clean, tidy children.
Well,
Um,
there's also the belief, Natasha, that children exist in a perfect, idyllic state of innocence,
yeah.
and that I guess we're corrupting them all the time. As they
You,
age towards adulthood, there's
yes.
that
And
happening. But
yes.
when you say protecting the children, I write sex positive books for kids. They're informative, they're age appropriate.
Hmm.
They are forearmed because I've left them forewarned. Why is
Hmm.
that not protecting a child?
Yeah. 100%. And I love that you say that because, when we talk about this idea of gatekeepers and who are we protecting and what are we protecting children from, how many of us either directly or knew a kid who, where their only representation that they saw of their life, of their experience was through a book,
Mhm.
and so, when I think about like how often growing up you have these books, at least when I was growing up, like it was always like these happy families who had some small little problems, but everything was kind of okay. And then that moment about reading when, not every family is happy, not every parent treats their child well. And that idea of, don't those children deserve to be represented? Don't the children who aren't living in this, like you said, Paul, this idyllic little bubble, don't they deserve to see themselves represented and see their lives represented and to get that encouragement that they too can get through it because here's this character who's gone through it. So Nafisa, can I jump that to you?
Sure, sure. When I was talking about gatekeepers, especially for writers, I was talking about specifically about editors who, um, for example, here's an anecdote. A friend of mine, she was writing a picture book, and this was really funny. And she had in her book kids climbing trees, and the editor was like, you can't do that, you can't have them climbing trees because climbing trees are very dangerous and parents complain. So there was barely any scenes of them playing outside or climbing trees because apparently climbing trees are a dangerous. I mean, it's not like kids are going to go find a tree to climb as if they read it in a book. I mean, so that's what I meant specifically for gatekeeping. For this question in particular, let me see if I can word it properly, articulate it properly. I feel like the subjectivity issue, and especially where the why it is so specifically sexuality of kids, is because a lot of times the sexuality of kids makes adults uncomfortable.
Mm,
So it's not about protecting the kids in so much as it is about protecting themselves and not having to have these discussions, which kids clearly need to have.
Yeah.
Because if it weren't, people would be allowed to, the kids would be encouraged to talk about these feelings that they might have and they might need to talk about to walk through them. So um, just by assuming that these things don't exist. If they are not in the library, they won't be feeling it. They won't want to, find other avenues to go look around for more information about it, or, find other ways to think about it, express it. So I feel like that is the subjectivity. It's the adults who have the problem, not the kids. Um,
No, that's a great point. Yeah.
The
and
same with
also,
adults too. And if these are teaching the kids, they're allowing the kids to play house, they're giving them baby dolls. As a species, and every species does this, we give our kids tools to navigate into adulthood. So when you teach a kid to play house or you give them a baby doll, those are teaching them sexualized gendered roles. Mommy
Hmm.
and daddy didn't make the baby because the stork came. We know that.
Hmm.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And they are just trying to the conventional. They have a corridor that they're allowed to walk through, and you cannot go on through any other doors except the corridor they have designated as the corridor you walk through.
Yeah.
I'm a writer.
Yeah. No, but you know what? I think that's well said. And especially when you think about like the quiet sexualization of children, specifically girls, in real life versus the sort of like anger they have with books. And I was thinking about, I think maybe like a year and a half ago, there was a mom who kind of went viral because she went on this rant because I think she'd gone to Target and she was looking for shorts for her 5-year-old, and she just was just holding up their shorts because she was like, why are you giving my 5-year-old daughter shorts? Like, look at the boys who get proper shorts that come down to their knees. Why is this thing like barely covering my 5-year-old daughter's butt? And then she ended up, buying the boys' shorts, because of that. So, Young, can you like, give us your thoughts on this? Like, where do you go with this kind of question?
The question, sorry, with respect to the protecting our children and their sexuality
Yeah, well,
and
just about
such.
the
Yeah.
idea of like this question that we're on right now about the subjectivity of how we define what is or isn't sexual, or what is or isn't appropriate or inappropriate for our children. Like, how do we as writers navigate that? I mean, should we, or do we just write what we want and then navigate past the gatekeepers?
Yeah, coming from the perspective of a medical doctor, because I work as a physician as well. And so I really think knowledge is very important when it comes to sexual health. And I've actually gone to Africa, the Gambia, and teach sexual health to Muslim kids. And so you know how restrictive and the Muslim culture can be when it comes to sexuality and such. But I was able to inform young children, and these are elementary students, about sexual health. And so I think when it comes to sexuality and such, and sometimes we do make too big a deal out of it. However, as a parent as well, at the same time, I do understand from the parent perspective why it is sometimes important to know what your children are reading in terms of the content and the sexual content of it, because it applies not only to books but applies to movies we watch as well as the clothes that we wear. So it is important, and I think we shouldn't uh, be condescending towards parents in general in what they hope for their children with respect to what is appropriate for their children in terms of the sexual content of materials. But it shouldn't, I don't think it should um, be a permit though to ban the books that are in our libraries and such, as Paul had said, and Afisa had said, with gatekeepers and such. We trust the teachers, we trust the system, that they allow books that are appropriate, that they feel are acceptable if a child happens to pick up that book. And I just think books, why it is so important is because it is so powerful in the with its words and the knowledge that it gives. And so it's very disconcerting, I think, when it comes to just that particular issue with sexuality, because it is an important part of who we are. And so I don't think there should be restrictions to it in any way. And I think writers, I don't think, I think a lot of us writers, we write because we, especially I know for myself, it's just I feel restlessness when there are, certain injustices and such in society, or a lack of certain knowledge about certain issues. And so I write, I put these thoughts down into words so that there can be dialogue. And I think that is the key is to have that dialogue. And so to have these books available, the important thing is not to ban or restrict access to it. It's more so to encourage the parents to have that conversation with their kids, when they do access these books, and to see where their children are in terms of where their heart is, where they are, and to meet their children in that place and have that discussion. And I think that is so important. And so to have these books available, I think, um, books are, books are a way of creating, the empathy and the understanding and respect and compassion for one another because of the knowledge that it holds. And it is important because it creates a more fair, and equitable society, a better world for our kids. And then so I think, yeah, I think
Yeah. Yeah.
it's an important, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you make some really, really good points. I mean, we sort of have to like move on to the next question, but kind of like back pocket, if we have a chance to come back, can I stick this in your back pockets, please? That the idea of um, the sexual content being banned, and yet violence in books is okay, right? We never really see this same level of anger and outrage when it comes to violence. And in fact, I remember talking to an author one time who had been told that it was okay for the book, within the book, for the kids to be extremely violent with each other. They just didn't want guns. And that has always sort of stuck with me, that they could use knives and whatever else, but just no guns. And yet, when it comes to like, oh, can this boy kiss this boy? Can this girl have a relationship with this girl or this boy? Then all of a sudden there comes in something. And I do kind of wonder about
Natasha,
it. Yeah, go
it's
for it.
because the sex isn't punitive. It's really
Um,
simple. It's a punitive
Pleasure.
sex, which like sexual assault is considered punitive sex.
Yeah.
Although those are very important stories to tell, and I'm not saying against it, there's a lot of it in children's literature.
Yeah.
But God forbid you show someone making an informed choice or having a good time. Because we all know that like teenagers have never had sex and like they turn 18, they wait.
They
They
wait.
wait for
Every
marriage.
kid in history
I'm
has
still
absolutely
waiting
waited.
for marriage, Natasha.
Yeah, like I do like it's those things that as writers and as human beings in the world, we just sort of have to sit with, and I was thinking about like I grew up in the Christian church. My parents were, deacons and elders, the whole bit. And I still, like 100 years later, still sit with the memory of sitting in the congregation and listening to the pastor telling the girls that they needed to dress modestly because the boys can't control themselves. And
But
if,
doesn't that also put the boys in an area like you were talking about the sexualization of young girls?
yeah,
When boys are put in the position of being conquestors or aggressors, we create a problem there. And we've often been talking about toxic masculinity in terms of
mhm,
children's books. It starts young with boys too. Jason Reynolds just wrote a great book about boys and sexuality and that sort of feeling. I, Jason is a great guy, very interesting to listen to. But he talks about that and how the boys are forced into a system that's equally as damaging.
Mhm.
yeah. Oh, 100%. When Mary Kay Letourneau, when she was arrested, one of the female cops said that she walked into the precinct and heard all the males male officers joking around about how they wish they had a teacher like that. And she sort of like ripped them apart and said, if this was a male teacher and this was a female child, you wouldn't be saying it. So why is it okay that this male child has been taken advantage of, right? And again, those are stories that need to be told, right? About what it looks like for boys growing up. Okay, so audience, as we're talking about sexuality in books and censorship, brace yourself for some really disturbing stats concerning social media and the like. So we have growing evidence that frequent social media use is associated with distinct changes in the brain. We know that 30% of social media use may be it creates social self-control challenges. We know that it triggers the same pathways as addiction does. We know, or maybe you don't know, that right now there's a class action lawsuit with several of the Ontario school districts who are suing like Meta and the like, saying you have damaged these children's brains, and now you need to pay for that. You need to pay these schools so that they have the resources to help these children because these children are now being compromised. And now we have, up to 95% of kids aged 13 to 17 saying that they use social media almost constantly. More disturbing even is that almost half of kids aged 8 to 12 are using social media. And then we go to the really dark and disturbing aspects of social media. And so it's the pedophilia rings and the sexual exploitation of children on these social media apps. And I'm trying to remember, there was something with Instagram where I think, and it was a really disturbing amount, like the percentage of grown men who were following the accounts of underage girls. And, we're talking underage is 18, but also underage is like under 15, under 12. And, a huge amount. And you got to ask yourself, why is that happening? And what is really happening when grown men want to follow the social media accounts of a 6-year-old? We also have this bottom one about Meta's technology removing more than 34 million pieces of child exploitation content from Instagram and Facebook. And that's the fourth quarter of 34 million instances. So let me go to this question then. And Nafisa, we're going to jump with you on this one. When we talk about protecting the children and that, parents need to be involved and they need to make these decisions for themselves and for their families, like, yes, absolutely. Why are we always meant to look at books? Like, why are we not looking at social media and saying this thing presents a clear and present danger to our children? Why not social media? So, Nafisa, what do you think?
I think simply because books are easiest to control right now.
Hmm.
Because you can, I mean, well, this is only talking about physical books, ebooks. People can pirate ebooks whenever.
Yeah.
But if it's physical books, at least that's my opinion. Um, that, that's an interesting comment.
Yeah.
So I feel like books compared to social media, where there's lots like money is involved
Mm,
and their laws will have to be changed and lobbying is involved. It's far simpler to just, talk to people and get books, like you mentioned, the secret book list that is people have secretly removed books that we don't know the titles of. It's,
hmm.
it's far simpler to remove books than to control social media.
Yeah. Well said. Paul, what do you think?
I actually sort of think the opposite, Nafisa, which is I think
Oh,
books are
interesting.
not controlled. They encourage active thinking and they encourage people to be
Mm,
active participants in consuming that form of media, which means it encourages free thinking, it encourages autonomy, whereas other forms of media like TV, music, social media is all consumptive in a passive way.
Hmm.
And so
oh,
it's
interesting.
easier to control a population when you've put them into a passive state.
I agree.
Yeah.
But if you think about ebooks and
No,
how
I thought your point was really interesting. No, I wasn't trying to disagree.
and
I thought, yeah, there's a physical thing you can control.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Now, what do you think?
Oh,
And
yeah.
the,
No, no, I think yeah, there's big issues when it comes to book banning, mainly because I think it is the power of the word, right, of the words and the knowledge, the content that are in books, because books have an amazing way to affect positive changes, but at the same time, it can, affect some negative changes too. Could cause some negative changes too, depending on the content. But in general, books are powerful because of the words. It's just words are very powerful, and and I think because it only affirms the importance of books because books have the power to shape an individual to take a person through a journey through stories that can shape their values and define a person as they grow up. And so I think the big issue why it is a big issue when it comes to banning of books is because books can be so
mm,
threatening for certain individuals because if they're uncomfortable with certain social issues or ideologies and such, then books can be very threatening to them because they see it as a way of, affecting society in certain ways through our children and such. But at and so that's why I think the banning of books is such a big issue. But at the same time, I think I sort of disagree with respect to why banning of books is more an issue than social media. But because I think social media is a huge issue,
mm,
and Australia had banned social media for kids up to 16 years of age, and so social media has been at the forefront of a lot of the discussions when I see patients in the clinic.
mm,
It's not about, what books are your kids reading. I encourage the kids to read books, and no matter what they read, but it's the social media content because I see so many patients with individuals with increased depression, anxiety, and
mhm,
attention issues, as well as it impacts their learning and their creativity. And so I think social banning of social media and such is a huge issue that is at the forefront of a lot of countries and government initiatives and such, because I think we were able to ban cell phone usage in the schools
mhm.
during the school hours as well. But yeah, at the same time, yeah, the book issue is critical because books are so powerful in shaping who we are. It has an enduring, lasting effect on all of us.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. They're disrupting, right? Books are
Mhm.
disruptive. They're meant to be. Nifisa, I had moved to Nyang. Was there anything you wanted to follow up on before we go to our next question?
No, 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 I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
good.
good. Okay. So I am going to move us on to the next question. So this was I'm trying to think of how many years ago this was now. But there was a big protest in the GTA, the 1 million March for Children to protect our children from indoctrination and sexualization. And the thing that catches me when I'd read the article was that you have this demonstrator, Nathan, who says that he's there to support children and the importance to maintain their innocence, right? What you're talking about there, Paul. And then he says, I think it's important we keep kids out of these important discussions that are really between parents and their children. And that teachers, institutions, unions, they shouldn't be having these types of conversations with our kids in such an overt fashion. This is all about like the sex education. Um, and the thing that sticks with me on this is as he's protesting, the Ontario sexual education curriculum absolutely allows parents to exempt their children. So there is never this thing where the children are mandated into sexual education. And I remember when it was on the news, and there was a parent who was so angry because she said her child was too young to learn about these things. And the reporter said, "What about the curriculum disturbs you?" She said, "Well, I didn't read it." And I go, okay. And then it turned out that under sexual education, it was just a unit on teaching the proper name for body parts, you know? And so when I think about all of this, here's my big question. Like, are we talking about the protection of our children, right? Do we, you know, because that feels like it's already there, or are we really talking about the control of other people's children? And to sort of, to the audience, to reference what Nafisa was talking about when she mentioned the secret list, the CBC had an article on January 6th saying that some books had been pulled from the Calgary Board of Education, the Edmonton Public School Board, and I think Rocky Mountain District. Strathcona didn't pull any books. But the interesting thing is the list is private, you know, so you can argue, Nathan can argue protecting the children from these discussions. But as an adult, my question is, why am I not allowed to see this list? What is so terrible or provocative about this list that I can't read it? And yeah, so there's books that have been pulled from our school districts, and none of us know what those books are because that information won't be released. So, you know, Paul, can I jump you into this? Are we
Or, I'm
protecting?
always opinionated, Natasha, and I have a good well, building on what we had been talking about, though, in terms of gatekeeping, and there's levels of discernment that have gone on before things ever reach a kid. And I
Mhm,
find that the publishing houses, the editors are often collaborators. A lot of my books wouldn't have existed without an editor who had the forethought to go, this is important and someone should be writing it,
mhm.
and who championed that book. So, shout out to editors for who are great editors and doing the work.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but when we talk about protecting children, are we also not just skirting the issue of criminalizing certain groups
Mm,
and making them seem like they're bad? Because when we look at the lists that exist, they are BIPOC authors, BIPOC books, they are queer authors and queer books. These are communities that have been put under the microscope before, were criminalized, are still being criminalized in any way. I've said this to people, and it's not a complaint or a woe is me. As a gay male author, it's very hard to get a school visit.
mhm.
And that's often because gay men have been seen on a slippery slope of being predatory and, I like older men. I don't want a young kid. Have a taste.
That's
But, we
fair. Yeah.
are, and I think that that's where we get distracted by using certain verbiage from what the true issue is, which is this not just an attack on certain communities?
Hmm. No, you're right. And, you know, sort of to what you're saying, I had sent the panel this list of books that Texas had banned. And it's so there includes a picture book when Wilma Rudolph played basketball, which touches on the racism that Olympian Wilma Rudolph had experienced growing up in Tennessee in the 1940s. And a parent thought it should be removed from school library because it opines prejudice based on race. Um, we have like there was somewhere like one who wanted so a nonfiction book called How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, who wanted the book. So the parent wanted the book to be erased or taken out, um, and instead suggested replacing it with copies of the Bible, which, as I said, as a kid growing up in Christianity, yeah, the Bible was never mean or racist to other groups at all. And then there was also ones that said, because it make children feel bad because racism existed. Like it's a whole thing. If you Google it, you can sort of see these answers that parents are giving. And again, it is fine if a parent doesn't want that book for their child or doesn't want that content for their child. But why is it this mass banning that nobody's children gets to no one's kid gets to read this. If my kid can't read it, nobody gets to do it.
And
Nafisa, what do you think?
underlying
Oh,
it
sorry.
all, Natasha, is this is an attack on all of our freedoms and all of our rights.
Hmm.
And because I'm not an expert, and I know I'm not, I went and looked up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms before this panel. And in Canada, we have the freedom of thought, of belief, of opinion, of expression, and of information.
Mm,
We freedom of speech is a US thing, and an interesting distinction between Canada and the US are the US freedom of speech allows more hate speech and things to occur. There are protections built into the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and in the way that we've worded it. So things that would not be covered would
yeah,
be anything under the criminal code, propaganda, hate speech, defamation,
yeah,
discrimination, fraud, or perjury. Those are things that aren't covered, whereas it's a gray area in the US. So,
Mm,
yay, Canada.
yeah.
yeah, no kidding. I noticed we're running low on time, so I want to give Young and Nafisa a chance to get their opinions in. So Young, can you give us your thoughts on this?
Um, yeah, no, it's again coming from the perspective of having, young children. I understand when parents approach these issues, saying that it's to protect the children, right? Because I want to protect my children, and I want them to
Yeah.
have a childhood that is magical. But at the same time, I feel that our children are our hope for the future, and they are what we want in terms of the possibilities, the potential for a better world, and so we can't have that unless we have children who are well read with diverse books, and are exposed to diverse experiences, so that they can develop that compassion and understanding of one another, so that we can have the different perspectives, and understand one another, so that we are not so polarized because
Hmm.
of social media and um, all the ugliness that's happening in the world today, and all the continued war, the continued racism, discrimination, and such. And so it is so important to have and expose kids to a variety of literature and perspectives. It's I protect my children in terms of wanting to um, guard them against certain experiences, like not being an alcoholic, for example. The
Mm,
experiences that can actually damage and harm them, and scar them for life. And recently I actually watched the last words for Eric Dane, who has just passed away from ALS, and he was traumatized because his father had committed suicide at the age of 7, and it affected his whole life forever. So these traumatizing experiences, you want to build a safe space, a safe childhood, healthy, so that they can grow up healthy. But that's different from exposing them to literature that builds their mind, and have them be a well-versed individual that can navigate life and help make this world a better place, because we're still a mess, unfortunately. Yeah.
well said,
Yeah.
well said. Nafisa, can you take us home on this one? Anything you want to add?
What struck me was the innocence in the earlier clip you
Mm,
shared, and I find that to be so remarkably narrowly defined. Like children, it suggests that most of the Canadian children come from one background where they have the
yeah,
luxury of being privileged to not have seen or done or
yeah.
being exposed to certain things. But we are a country of immigrants, and some of us do not have the luxury of being in a privileged to be safe during our
Mhm.
formative years. And so, what by doing this, by banning books and teaching certain things, what you're doing is othering the kids as they are,
Yeah.
and you're telling them that you're already somehow wrong, flawed. So
Hmm.
I have issues with that.
Yeah. And I mean, I would agree with you, and I would argue too that it's not just people who immigrate into the Canadian culture that don't necessarily have that one background. There's many experiences of, white cisgender heteronormative kids where they're not living that innocent life, right? So, okay, I'm gonna just jump us out of these questions, um, so that uh, I'm trying to find the chat. Ashley, were there any questions that our participants wanted to bring to us?
So there was some discussion here. It looks like the first question we have comes from Rebecca. And Rebecca asks, it's good to consider the developmental phase of the children with the timing of exposure. A question is, do the children right now need to be exposed to the truth of the Epstein files? So I'm not sure how this pertains to the discussion and if this is one that you want to address, but that's the only question that we're outright question that we're dealing with at the moment.
Oh, that's interesting. I would argue no. I feel like the Epstein files is one of those moments where that is an adult conversation.
Mm.
Um, Paul Nafisa-Young,
I
No, I think
Rebecca, you
every
can clarify exactly, but yeah, as a knee-jerk reaction, I go no, because
I
that's
mean,
horrific.
Yeah, and when I say, expose children to diverse literature and experiences, it's not to say that it shouldn't be measured, age appropriate and such. But it's important if they happen to see the Epstein files on Netflix or so, and they happen to click on it, then it's good as a parent to step in and to have that conversation and explain what the situation is as well, because kids are capable of understanding that.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my niece and nephew are 12 and 11, and they knew. We didn't have to tell them. They talked about it in school. So what we needed to do was talk to them about what it is and what's happening, and that was an interesting conversation. So yeah, it's not. There are certain things that it'll be difficult for you to avoid because it's everywhere right now. But the important thing is to make sure to communicate, to talk, to have a conversation with them about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you sort of hit that nail on the head too, that you can't escape certain things. You may hide your child from it or protect your child from it, but other kids are talking, you know. And so I remember with lots of parents who didn't want their kid reading Twilight, but every kid knew what Twilight was about anyway, because all the other kids were talking about it. So, and same thing with the Harry Potter books. You didn't have to read it to know what was going on.
Hmm.
Paul, anything you want to say on that?
No, I agree with everything that's been said, and it's pervasive. It's how do you not talk about it when they're already being confronted with it?
Yeah, and so let me, when we talk about that, can I
And you don't
swing this?
shove their heads through the window of tolerance. Like that's not the
Yeah,
goal here.
that's great. That's a great image. So I want to say this though. The ABC Life Literacy in Canada says 49% of adult Canadians have literacy skills that fall below a high school level, which negatively affects their ability to function at work and in their personal lives. 19% are functioning at the lowest level, where they may be unable to read the dosage instructions on a medicine bottle. And if we contrast that with employers who say that an increase in literacy enhances the ability of individuals to handle a job, it includes improved health and safety conditions, better team performance, a higher quality of work, making more money. Do we risk really sort of harming our children um, by not allowing them to read within those safe parameters? I mean, a parent can read with their child, a guardian can read with their child. And like you said, if he's like, you can have those discussions about, yes, this disturbing thing is happening and this is how we're handling it. Um, but yeah, like any thoughts on that while I scroll through to see if there's any other questions? Paul, any thoughts on
So
um,
Paul will run his mouth. Um, as I said, I don't really approach story from a place of trying to improve literacy levels, or I consider my job is to tell a good story. And I think if I do that in a way that it encourages a child to read and empowers them to read,
yeah.
Yeah,
that you might want to do unenjoyable tasks. And I think all four of us write good stories that kids want to read, and then they pick up another book.
Hmm.
Yeah.
but at the same time, I'm actually a very strong advocate of education and kids learning the fundamentals, the foundation of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Right? I don't think we can have enthusiastic readers unless we actually go back to the school system and the curriculum, and then ensuring that kids learn the phonics, to be able to read with confidence and such. And at the same time, at home,
Mm,
for parents to talk to them, when they're born, to talk to them, to read to them, to expose them to books, and to teach them the alphabet at home, whereas at school is such a huge responsibility that can't be overemphasized for the curriculum to be strong, so that we build strong readers. Because when you have strong readers and they're confident in reading, they are eager and excited to read, and that's when they will reach out for books that can excite them, especially when they see books that are telling stories that they can relate to. They see themselves in these books and these characters and the lives that are lived. And at the same time, having the diverse books, gives a different perspective. But you don't have enthusiastic readers unless you have strong readers. And so that
mm,
starts at the school and the home level. And then we step in as writers. We write books that can inspire them, that can lead them down certain passion, and open their mind, and help reduce the polarity in this
yeah,
society, this world. Yeah.
100%.
That raises the question, are we being, and I'm not hired to write curriculum books, so are we putting messaging and curriculum ahead of story? And because I write, I choose to write, I always put story and character first.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
think that one of the school districts in Texas banned all references to the Holocaust in one of their textbooks. Please fact check me on that one. I know there was a huge scandal with Texas banning something historical that had actually happened because they said it would make the kids feel bad. So now, so to that idea of curriculum and messaging and
I mean, should they
propaganda
not
and
feel bad about the
indoctrination.
Holocaust, Natasha? Like, of all the things to feel bad about, yeah, feel bad about
Yes.
that.
Nafisa, do you want to say something?
I agree with Nang, and I feel like as writers and with Paul, I don't sit down and be like, oh, am I going to increase literacy? I do think that um, parents need to be readers too, to encourage to make their kids readers. If this
Hmm.
if a child sees you sit down with a book, and because the kids usually imitate their parents, they will want to sit down with a book right beside you, and keep
Hmm.
you from reading, but at least they'll be reading. The act of opening a book, or an ebook, whatever, if they see it happening, they will have some memory of it, and it will grow.
Hmm.
So I feel like learning reading starts at a very young age from the
Yeah.
parents. So if you can't really depend on teachers have a lot going on,
Yeah.
right? So if you can't sit down and read with your child, and you are surprised that they don't like reading.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and so we only have 2 minutes left, and I just want to say thank you to the panelists, because that was like, I'm gonna be thinking about this for like the rest of the week at least. So thank you to the panelists and to the WJ for hosting it, and to our audience. But before I turn it off over to Ashley, Nafisa, I just want to jump off of what you said about like the parents reading. And my dad, I think, wins the award for sneakiest way to get their kid to read, because he used to get the Time magazine subscriptions. And he said to me one day, because I was like, "Oh, can I read that?" And he went, "Oh, I don't know. It's all adult stuff. I think you would find it boring, And it was this idea that I could partake in adult stuff, and I was like, "No, I could." Which, yeah, led to me being a huge Times Magazine fan. So shout out to my dad for that one. Ashley, can we turn it over to you with the 1 minute that's left?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to you, Natasha, for moderating, and to the rest of the panelists for their contributions. It was a great discussion today. And just a reminder that there will be a recording of this put up on our YouTube channel shortly here for folks that want to share. So, yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.